Gentlemen, we have called you together to inform you that we are going to overthrow the United States government. Do you still think that jet fuel brought down the World Trade Center? Does anybody else see a problem here? If the government has nothing to hide, why are they so afraid to answer a few questions? This story does not add up. Listen to me. Listen to your...
In Time magazine, we see the symbols on both sides of the speaker's podium where the president is standing. The point I'm making is that, yes, this is Time magazine with bin Laden on the cover. We're talking about the big enemy. The big enemy. I will assure you bin Laden is not the enemy. Let me show you what the enemy really is. But if you understand symbolism, Nazi, fascist symbolism, you will notice on each side of the presidential podium two interesting, perhaps 5-foot-high symbols on each side of the podium where the president stands. This is what is referred to as a fasci, a bundle of sticks with a hatchet head. Now, what is the importance of a fasci? This is a symbol of Nazi fascism. The stuff that so many good Americans went to war in Second World War to defend the free countries of the world against Nazis and fascists. And why is the symbol of Nazism, fascism, on the presidential podium where the president stands to give his State of the Union address? We see Roman fasces, the symbol of international fascism. Somebody better start waking up and finding out bin Laden is not our enemy. This man is not your enemy. Here is the enemy. The symbols of world fascism, Nazism, the mace itself. One needs to understand that in the United States Senate there is a symbol called the mace. This mace is a Nazi fascist symbol. It comes out of the ancient Roman Empire. The fasci symbols of the bundle of sticks with a hatchet head comes out of the Roman fascist system in Europe. So if we have an enemy, you can bet your bottom dollar here is the enemy. There's this whole thing about bin Laden being the dirty, rotten enemy. I think before we jump on the bandwagon and believe anything that comes out of Washington, D.C., I mean, we have had over and over and over again proven to us the lies, deception, hypocrisy, the conspiracies against this country hatched in Washington, D.C. Anyone who knows anything about government, and I've spent 42 years, day in and day out, looking, researching, and studying occultism, conspiracies in government. And anyone who knows anything about the subject knows that Washington, D.C. is probably one of the most corrupt places on the face of the earth. There is more lies, deception, manipulation, exploitation, not just of the people of color, but for the whole entire world. The media in America are nothing more than lackeys for international banking cartels out of England. It's just a disgusting, and when I think about how many Americans were killed in New York City, and believing as I do that this thing was a setup job, because it's a textbook, as far as I'm concerned, this is a textbook operation that Nazis used, and they've used it over and over again. America has been suckered in one more time.
And now it's time for a brand new Man on the Street. And this is a segment that our writer, producer, and now reporter John Bound put together as he takes to the streets of Austin, Texas to investigate denial. Here's what he has to say.
I'm in Austin, Texas, on the UT campus. I've been asking students all day about the recently passed NDAA legislation. I was surprised to learn where the real denial is coming from.
Just one look at mainstream news will make any rational thinker conclude that Americans are in a hyper state of denial. Public opinion is in a stranglehold when it comes to real, open, honest debate. Whether it's the looming war in Iran based on fear-mongering and little fact, or the blind eye given to Ron Paul's agenda to get the country back to its constitutional values.
The new Suffolk University poll shows him with a commanding lead in New Hampshire at almost 30 points above his rivals. At the same time, Newt Gingrich and John Huntsman have faltered. Rick Santorum, who polls in single digits here, is looking to give Romney a run in the Granite State after his near victory in Iowa.
Are people aware that they could be kidnapped, detained without trial, and sent away to a torture facility for an untimely death simply based on the description of domestic terrorism? Denial comes in three forms according to Sigmund Freud. Simple denial. Deny the reality of the unpleasant fact altogether.
Do you feel like you get all the information you need from mainstream media?
No, I don't. I hardly watch the news anyway. And I'm in a lying and deception class right now, and we talked about media and like news and how most of it is just, they take like the smallest thing possible, it's not a big deal, and blow it out of proportion so you at least feel like something important's going on, when in fact like there are other things that could be covered that, I mean, they don't want to cover or they don't.
Minimization. Admit the fact, but deny its seriousness.
Just wanted to ask you if you've heard about the NDAA legislation, the bill that allows the president to detain American citizens, whisk them away off to a torture facility, and never be seen again, that's been legalized as of this year. Are you aware of this?
I actually have heard of that. That's like how they weren't going to close Guantanamo. That was like the legislation that like decided that, I believe.
If you're labeled a domestic terrorist, which could include the fact that you're missing fingers, that you bought beer at a store with cash, that you bought baby formula, do you take that seriously, or would you feel like, yes, that may be happening, but it's probably for a good reason?
Because I don't know the details, like I want to say that it could possibly be for a good reason.
Projection. Admit both the fact and the seriousness, but deny responsibility.
Once the war against Saddam begins, we expect every American to support our military, and if they can't do that, to shut up.
Would you be more prone to say, yeah, that's happening, but there's nothing you can do about it?
I don't think that there's nothing that can be done. I think if enough people are informed about it, then the more people that are informed, the more people can, have an input and say, and one voice, adds to that change.
So, I mean, what's the entire point of this bill?
Domestic terrorism, they want to quiet their critics. We represent the alternative media. Mainstream media didn't even cover NDAA.
I mean, I have an idea that, the media is like, sponsored by certain, political parties and also certain people with power within this country, and they don't allow certain information to be, transmitted to the masses out of, it just wouldn't be right for the normal person's psyche.
American citizens are distracted by a number of worthless, time-consuming outlets. We are all addicted to our own self-importance. The only way to begin to treat addiction, whether it is alcohol or drugs, for example, is to break the cycle of denial. The mainstream media delivers a skewed reality, manipulating the American landscape with their theater of denial.
Isn't it amazing that we're denying our own slavery to a system fueled by that very denial? John Bound, InfoWars Nightly News.
Wow, and that was a great piece put together by John Bound. We'll also put together our quote of the day for us today. It's from Marcus Cicero. Though silence is not necessarily an admission, it is not a denial either. Once again, that was from Roman philosopher, consul, and Roman constitutionalist Marcus Cicero. And now it's time for part 4 of an InfoWars exclusive interview with Kurt Haskell, witness to the government cover-up of Delta Flight 253. Now, it is a fact that the U.S. government allowed the underwear bomber to board the plane even though he had no passport and was on the government terror watch list. Passenger Kurt Haskell famously witnessed a sharp-dressed Indian man force officials to let Abdul Muttalib board the plane, Again, even though he had no passport and was listed as a potential terrorist. And of course, the establishment media, they have predictably remained silent on this epic story as they continue to regurgitate the official government fable of the underwear bomber. But fortunately for you, the InfoWars viewer, you're about to get a dose of the hardcore truth. An interview with Kurt Haskell, key witness to the false flag terror attack aboard Delta Flight 253, the subsequent government cover-up that followed.
Walk us through what you saw in Amsterdam.
Sure. Lori and I were sitting near the boarding gate. Sitting on the floor, there weren't any seats to sit in. And I saw two men, and they caught my eye because they seemed to be an odd pair. One was what I would describe as a poor-looking black teenager around 16 or 17, and the other man, a age 50-ish, wealthy-looking Indian man, and I was just wondering why they were together. Kind of strange. And I watched them approach what I would call the ticket agent, the final person that checks your boarding pass before you get on the plane. And I could hear the entire conversation. The only person that spoke was the Indian man, and what he said was, this man needs to board the plane, but he doesn't have a passport. And the ticket agent responded, well, if he doesn't have a passport, he can't get on the plane. To which the Indian man responded back, he's from Sudan, we do this all the time. And the ticket agent said, well, then you'll have to go and talk to my manager. And she directed them down a hallway. And that was the last time that I saw the Indian man, and the black man I didn't see again until he tried to blow up our plane.
I assume, though, that they're not patting people down in the crotch area, which is where this fellow allegedly had the bombs.
We could deploy the scanning machines that we currently are beginning to deploy in the U.S. that would give us the ability to see what someone has concealed underneath their clothing.
I also want to point out, in your current role as a security consultant, you are representing some of the companies who manufacture that technology, correct?
Absolutely correct.
One thing I'd like to point out is that the system worked.
Well, the underwear bomber case is important because it's the most, in my opinion, it's the most clear evidence of a false flag event by the U.S. government. I think if you actually take the time to look into the evidence, the official version is not backed up by anything other than statements by members of the government. There is actually a great deal of evidence that backs up what I'm saying. So it's important in that sense that it's a very clear picture that the U.S. government stages terrorist attacks to forward their agenda, whatever that may be at that time. Not only that, but if you look at how the government's treated this case, you can see all the tools they use when they use the false flag attack, which is, denying evidence and telling the media to not report certain things, blasting in the media all the unimportant things, propaganda issues that support their story, the government forwarded story, not the real story. And it just gives you a real window how they handle these things. And if you look at the picture of this, how they handle things, and you see things happen in the future, you can take their playbook, if you will, and apply it to the ones in the future. And tell what's a false flag event or not. There had been no terrorist attacks on flights in the U.S. since 2001, so people were kind of getting, weary of the war on terror, thinking, hey, why are we spending all this money on the war on terror when there is no war on terror? Nothing's happening. We're not stopping anybody. Number two, we had when this happened in December 2009, we had certain parts of the Patriot Act that were up for renewal. They actually came up for renewal in early December 2009, just a couple weeks before this happened. And you can look it up on the internet. Hillary Clinton actually said, look, my constituents don't want to vote for the renewal. They don't think it's needed, and politically this will be damaging if, my party votes for renewal of these parts of the Patriot Act.